All right, everybody. Let me know if you can hear me and see me because I think both of those things are decently important. Otherwise, welcome to another Monday night where we can discuss some of the crazy stuff that's happening in the world, especially some of these alarming developments that are part of this attritional SHTF that we are all currently witnessing or experiencing, depending on where you are in the world or, what situation you currently have. So thank you all very much. And I want to say that every single week when I come here, it's always a blessing to have all of you here supporting me. It really means a lot. So it looks like we're still waiting for things to catch up. Please let me know if you can hear me and see me. That would be amazing. Otherwise, thank you all so much. I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. And of course, thanks to them, I can do live streams like this one. And I also want to share that Genesis Gold Group via magicpreppergold.com gives you the options to stabilize some of your assets regarding precious metals. So they support the live streams on this channel, and they're also willing to support this community when it comes to gold-backed or silver-backed IRAs that you can roll a retirement account over into, or they'll even send precious metals directly to your door depending on quantity. So there's a lot they can do for you. They don't work with China, and they don't fund any of these DEI initiatives or anything like that. So a big thanks to Genesis Gold Group. That's magicpreppergold.com. Please check them out. Let them know I said hello. So, and like I said, Midway USA, huge supporter of the channel, biggest supporter by far. Really appreciate what they do for me here. Thank you all for being here. It's really excellent to have these conversations. And once a week, I feel like we can get together and go over some of the previous week's interesting stories and just kind of talk about where we are in the world right now. And as things progress, it's kind of easy to lose track of all these little minute small things that are occurring, but we need to at least keep an eye on them because they can easily evolve into much larger problems. 5x5s are coming through. And just so everybody knows, I did try to alleviate the issues we were having with YouTube placing ads in weird places right in the middle of these live streams. So hopefully there shouldn't be any in the middle of this live stream, but I just don't know how these settings work until they happen, right? So let me know in the chat tonight if you get bombarded with like an ad in the middle of the live stream or something, so I can remember exactly what these settings are and try to fix that next time. I'm trying not to interrupt this live session for everybody, so I appreciate the feedback and I'm doing the best I can. And if you're on the replay crew, thanks for being here. You guys are awesome. You always come back to support what we do here and to get the information. And I appreciate you. And please make sure you check in the comments below so that way we can make sure to say hello. So, interesting stuff happening here. We got Mike H with the 5x5. We got Jay Ross 556x45. We've got Don Pyle saying star ID here. Round one says 5x5 is 25. Luckily, some of us still know math, which is actually pretty important. Let's get started, okay? This attritional SHTF that we're all experiencing, right? It's in full swing. When I say that, the reason behind the title of tonight's live stream is because what we're witnessing is the wearing down of the United States of America. We're being slowly eroded away at because it's really the only way an oppositional force could actually impact us, right? If you wanted to damage the largest military force on the planet and the most powerful superpower, how would you do it without entering a direct conflict? You would have to do it through the strategy of 1,000 cuts, right? So that's where we're at right now. And I don't know how many cuts we're at, right? Maybe 500, I'm not sure, but it's becoming very clear that that's exactly what we're witnessing. And our let's just say public officials, we're going to call them, some of them seem complicit in it, in my opinion. So let's just talk about that to get started with tonight. So in case you didn't know, yesterday, of course, was a Super Bowl, which is a great distraction. And I think that the Senate decided to take full use of that distraction. And this is what was happening on Sunday during the Super Bowl, which you should be aware of, which should also raise some alarm bells for you to say, they probably weren't wanting us to pay attention to all this, right? I mean, let's be honest. It doesn't matter if you watch the Super Bowl or not. Them doing this during that event tells you that there was probably some sort of motivation there. Senate moves one step closer to passing package with aid to Ukraine and Israel despite Trump's opposition, okay? The Senate on Sunday, remember this, on Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, they decided to try to push more of this through. So understand that they're trying to do these things without too much public criticism occurring. The Senate on Sunday took a step closer to passing a $95.3 billion foreign aid bill, with crucial assistance for Ukraine and Israel following a key vote to move the package forward, including with the support of 18 Republicans despite opposition from former President Donald Trump. And of course, this particular article is being referenced by CNN, which obviously is going to have a political bias, but we go all over the spectrum on this channel in case you're new here, so don't worry, we're not going to just rely on CNN. I 100% guarantee that. The foreign aid package includes billions of dollars to support Ukraine's fight against Russia and for security assistance for Israel, as well as humanitarian assistance for civilians in Gaza, the West Bank, and Ukraine. The vote was 67 to 27. One more GOP senator voted yes on Sunday's procedural vote than Thursday's procedural vote on the bill, a sign that GOP support for the measure has remained consistent and even expanded in recent days. Okay? Now, this is where they say the quiet part out loud, basically, okay? I can't remember the last time the Senate was in session on Super Bowl Sunday, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said. But as I've said all week long, we're going to keep working on this bill until the job is done. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut said on CBS Face the Nation he believes the Senate will be able to pass the bill that includes funding for Ukraine by early to mid-week. Now, this goes to show you that our officials, right? They're not leaders at this point in time. Sometimes I refer to them as leaders because that's the role that they should possibly fulfill, but they clearly do not. But I just want to make sure we clarify that. They're just public officials. They should be public servants, but that's not what we have right now. They are going to push us further and further into this conflict, and they're going to keep funding these wars no matter what the cost is. And right now, the cost is the economy, the American people suffering through said economy, and the potential for escalated conflict all over the planet. All of those are negative for us here in the United States, as well as for our allies in other nations, because once this thing goes hot and spirals out of control, there's not much we can do to fix it at that point. But these people don't care. The funding is what they want no matter what. They're pushing it through on a Super Bowl Sunday. Now, the Congress will still have to go through and vote on this Senate bill. It'll have to go through the House, and then they'll have to go through and get all the votes and actually even introduce it to be voted on, which they're saying might not even happen. But the fact that this is happening on Super Bowl Sunday should just give you some pause to say, why are they doing this, right? And we know Rand Paul of Kentucky is actually trying to slow the process down so that more people can be aware of what's happening there. And at the bare minimum, it should just remind you that they're going to keep funding these wars as best they can. No matter what, they're going to do it publicly, under the radar if they can, but if they can't, they're still going to try. And we have former President Donald Trump coming out and saying, no one should vote for this. We need to reevaluate how we fund, with foreign aid and everything else. And even people on the Republican side of the aisle are ignoring those warnings. So it's a very contentious situation we currently have. And our political scenario right now is a trash fire. It's a dumpster fire. So Eric Massey checking in from the Washington liberal communist state. Thank you so much for checking in. And it is interesting. Oh, you got a commercial, Savage Lee? All right, well, like I said, I tried to adjust the settings to make them more, to make it so there wouldn't be any in the middle of this live stream. So I'll have to work on it. Okay, so, and also, here's the thing. We're just having issues when it comes to moving forward as a country. We can't move forward. And right now, just to share some of my personal feelings with all this before we start jumping into more of these geopolitical concerns that are being funded directly by our politicians on a Super Bowl Sunday. I guess the biggest issue for me is that this year is almost like a all or nothing type situation for these people, right? It doesn't matter how the election goes. They have to just plan on getting whatever they want to do done before the next term, no matter which president that might be, no matter what that might mean. There's no guarantees, and the unrest that might develop during the election time isn't something they're necessarily prepared for based on obvious circumstance, right? So my concern is that what we're going to witness here within these next 8 to 10 months is a exponentially faster escalation towards something much more egregious because they're running out of time. And they're going to just do whatever they want to do before that time runs out, because they might not have the chance otherwise. And that's actually kind of concerning. And the same can be said about our enemies as well, because they are understanding of that same exact scenario. If they thought, okay, if a different president gets elected during this election that has a completely different policy approach or doesn't want to play ball or whatever it might be, well, then we have to make these moves before that person has the ability to try to stop us, right? So like, I'm just not feeling very positive about our current trajectory. So, and by the way, I do want to say these new state names everybody's coming in with, like Evening from Communist California, we just had our Washington remark as well. If these names actually end up having a change to those, that will be a very interesting time in our history, won't it? Let's move on. Okay, so we already know we're funding more of what's happening in Ukraine. So let's talk about that, because not only are we funding them more, but they're having issues, obviously. But what's interesting about their issues is that we can look at them through the lens of the possibilities of our future. Okay, what does that mean? Well, here, let's talk about it directly. Exhausted Ukraine struggles to find new men for front line. This article is from 12 hours ago. So this is newer information, but this struggle they're having is continual. Now, apply this to the fact that our recruiting numbers here in the United States are abysmal, and we are missing all of our quotas every single quarter. What does that tell you a hot conflict between the U.S. and any other international superpower would look like? I would be prepared to have a plan in place, okay? When Pavlo Zilhin and his patrol hit the streets of Cherkasy, men often swerve to avoid them. Pavlo is a conscription officer looking for soldiers for Ukraine's army. But almost 2 years into Russia's full-scale invasion, there's no flood of volunteers to the front line anymore. Now, this is part of the attritional SHTF. This is part of attrition warfare. This is how they wear you down over time to the point where morale is defeated, enthusiasm is gone, and any level of aggression that this whole conflict began with when it came to the defensive posture is slowly being removed because of how long everything's taking. It just takes the air out of everybody's wings, right? Florida Sheepdog, when politicians work weekends, we are screwed. Well, that's something you could definitely apply to our current scenario, I assume. Okay, so keep that in mind as we move forward in this story, but it's very interesting to kind of see how this is evolving right now. Most of those who wanted to fight are either dead, injured, or still stuck at the front waiting to be relieved by new recruits. In the central town of Cherkasy, like elsewhere, finding them isn't easy now that the first burst of enthusiasm and energy has faded. Ukraine is exhausted. I don't get it. People are out and about. Like the war is somewhere far away. But this is a full-scale invasion. And it's like people still don't care, Pavlo says. He is frustrated by what he sees as indifference. We need everyone to come together like they did on the first day. Everyone was united then like brothers. Instead, the security service in Cherkasy is constantly shutting down local social media channels that warn people when the conscription teams are in town and alert them of areas to avoid. At 24, Pavlo has sacrificed a lot for his country. He grew up dreaming of being a soldier. His eyes lit up when he remembers that, and he was serving in the army in February 2022 when Russian troops rolled across the border. He fought near Kiev, then Soledar, then in the eastern Donbass where the battle was brutal. That first summer, he was moved to Bakhmut. We came under heavy fire. A shell landed next to me. I lost my whole elbow. There was nothing left, he says, describing an attack in which he was badly injured. He managed to crawl beneath a bush, and he began to pray. Okay? The soldier admits that getting to a hospital was a huge relief, not just because he'd survived, but because he was finally off the front line. It was hard there. I can't even put it into words. He looks down and falls quiet. Okay? So, from this story, and then it goes on and on, they talk about each other's time there and all the length of time and everything else, right? Here's the thing that you really should keep in mind. This is how attrition works, and this is what could be applied even in the United States, even if there was a domestic conflict here between two rival factions, especially if one of those factions happened to have the keys to the castle, let's just say. Well, all they'd have to do is wait it out. And if they have the ability to wait it out, then they're more than likely going to win. And that's exactly what Russia has the capability of doing in Ukraine. They can just wait it out. And because of that, the people of Ukraine are getting tired. They're exhausted. And like he said, people are just running around day to day as if nothing is happening. I don't get it. People are out and about like the war is somewhere far away. But this is a full-scale invasion, and it's like people still don't care. That's how fast a modern warfare scenario has devolved into normalcy bias. These people have literally gone from being invaded by an occupying force to just going and getting a coffee and going to work, right? Like it's not what everybody thinks, I guess, right? Even myself included. Like this isn't what I would have anticipated 2 years into this scenario. But it goes to show you what it might look like if something were to happen in any other country similar to Ukraine. Maintaining that morale and that enthusiasm is extremely important to a war effort. And from what I can tell, it seems like they're not capable of maintaining it at this point in time. Okay, so let's see here. We got good people here in the comments section. Somehow my posts keep getting blocked tonight. Don Pyle, I don't know why. And it's definitely not me, because you better believe I don't have time to be jumping on that right now. Dustin Pribble, same thing happened in World War II. Exactly. Everyone wants it to be fast and they want it to be done with, but that's just not how war works, especially now. And with well-funded, well-stocked superpowers, they can sort of outlast just about anyone else. So, especially when you're talking about like a guerrilla force, that attrition becomes extremely important. And that's where the warfare tends to evolve into a long timeline of who's going to give up first, right? And I mean, look at Afghanistan as one of the best modern examples of that. How long were the Soviets occupying Afghanistan before finally leaving? How long did the U.S. occupy Afghanistan before finally leaving? I mean, in many ways, it demonstrates that with enough time and enough motivation, somebody will eventually feel like it's not worth it anymore. And that's exactly what I assume our enemies, both foreign and domestic, would assume about us as well, right? So it's going to be an interesting spring and summer this year, to be sure, at Magic Prepper. There's a lot of things to watch out for. One of those things could easily be a replacement, let's just say candidate. I guess that's what we'll call him at this point. A replacement candidate could show up suddenly in the spring or summer and change everything about the whole situation, right? And I have other theories about that scenario as well, which we might discuss here at a certain point in time. Now, let's move on, because we have another perspective of that same scenario, but this is actually coming from an African media outlet, okay? Ukrainian troops angry push for new recruits. They're mad about it. Kiev, having rushed to join the Ukrainian army when Russia invaded. Ivan Zhdanov is now exhausted as the grinding campaign enters its third year, okay? And every article we're discussing tonight is from this week, just so everybody's aware. So we're talking about some relevant new information, okay? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. But anyway, what I'm feeling is just fury. Just how long can it take? Zhdanov, a press officer in the 24th Separate Assault Battalion, told AFP. We're all tired. We want to get some rest. Please, guys, just switch us around. The 27-year-old who has seen combat said. Fatigue and calls to give soldiers relief pose a dilemma for military leaders who need more manpower to hold off Russian attacks. There's little room for maneuver in Kiev, caught between sluggish voluntary recruitment and a politically perilous mobilization bill. People need to be given time off, not just to recover and continue fighting, said Sergei Orgorodnik, 39, who leads a company within the airborne assault forces. They need time to rebuild their civilian lives. And they just don't have it. So they're stressing about it, okay? Now, I just wanted to kind of mention that because I don't think we would see anything different in a Western country in the same scenario. After a certain amount of time, people will lose the will to continue the fight. That's why morale is so important. And when we discuss this, I just want you to kind of think about it and apply it to your preparedness maneuvers when it comes to how you would act in a similar situation and how your group or your local community or whatever might come together and what you might do in order to maintain that level of energy and morale and enthusiasm required to get through these very perilous times. Because that's a huge part of it. These people are in extremely dangerous, extremely perilous situations, and it's hard to maintain a certain level of energy as you go through that. It's just awful for the human psyche, right? So just be aware that some things like morale boosters are worth having on hand. So, let's see here. Yeah, that old Michael Jackson video showing an Afghan soldier popping off rounds on one leg. I don't know what we're talking about, Mike H, but I just read the comment, I guess. Not a replacement candidate, a replacement installment. Knight who says knee said. Exactly. And that's where we are. And it's unfortunate because I don't know how that's going to go. Like I said, I have my own theories, but let's keep moving forward because we have a little bit more touch base on here. Now, here's where things are interesting. We all know fog of war exists. We all know that the propaganda game is in full swing as well, and that's all part of this attritional warfare. Like, wear your enemy down on all fronts, and some of those fronts are based in the media, right? And it's how you damage more morale. It's how you try to raise morale. It's a lot of ways that you can approach things in that type of environment. But this is one that I thought was interesting because there's a lot of just, I don't know what to say, but this is a great example of that type of propaganda push when it comes to trying to raise or boost morale or try to at least incite emotions when it comes to why we need to keep fighting, right? Or whatever it is you want to apply this to. Harbor Prepper, Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters wrote an excellent article about public disconnect back during the Iraq War, entitled An Enemy at War and Nation at the Mall. Definitely worth reading. Thanks for the tip. I appreciate that, Harbor Prepper, and I appreciate the super chat. So thank you very much for that. But I will definitely keep that in mind and consider picking that up. So there was an ad, South Florida DCL. Okay, I just so we're on the same page, I set this so that I would have to manually put ads into this live stream, and I did not manually put any. So I thought that would mean there wouldn't be any. Like I said, I'm trying my best here, okay? So me not adding any should have been 0, I would have assumed. But I guess YouTube decided that I didn't do enough. So I'll try to see if I can change that next week, okay? I apologize, but thanks for letting me know. I really appreciate it. All right, so this is interesting. Ukraine army accuses Russia of using chemical weapons in attacks. This is from February 11th. The Public Relations Service of the Support Forces Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine accused Russia on Friday of using chemical weapons in the ongoing conflict, with a staggering total of 815 recorded attacks since the commencement of the large-scale war. Now, this is very emotionally charged. This would make you very upset, right? Especially like if this was happening to us here in the United States, you'd be like, well, this is unacceptable. Chemical weapons, that's like illegal. You can't do that. The report highlights the use of ammunition equipped with poisonous chemical substances, particularly grenades such as K-51, RGR, and RGVO, which contain the dangerous chemical CS. To gather evidence, Ukrainian intelligence units within the RHC have been conducting sampling of soil, vegetation, and ammunition fragments, which are then sent for analysis. Documented cases of the use of dangerous chemicals are being submitted to investigative bodies as part of an open criminal proceeding. Sorry, that previous comment was in response to your comment about how long the Afghan-Russian lasted. Yes, okay, well, thanks, Mike, for clearing that up. I really appreciate it. So, here's the thing, okay? My understanding, and this, you guys let me know in the chat if I'm right about this, but my understanding is that CS is the same type of gas used in tear gas. Like this, they're talking about tear gas here, right? Which is used for like riot control during, you know, I don't know, the summer of love here in the United States, right? CS gas is used regularly by law enforcement, or at least that's my understanding. And I would assume that military units would also use CS gas for certain applications, like probably clearing out a building that they don't want to have to breach if they don't need to, or many other things they might use it for. So because of that, we're reading this as if they're using chemical weapons. And my mind goes to things like, you know, sarin gas or things of that nature, which are much more fatalistic than CS gas. Is CS gas legal? I don't know that answer, to be completely honest with you, but I don't also, you know, subscribe to the idea that people are going to follow every single little rule there is for war. I mean, if we were under attack by a foreign invading force, do you think I'm going to reference the Geneva Convention every time I do something weird? Probably not. So, all I'm saying is that, okay, CS has a stickier compound, unlike tear gas, says Don Pyle. Okay, and other people say CS ain't all that bad. Tastes kind of nice, says Western Wanderer. U.S. Army used CS gas in Afghanistan. Yeah, so my understanding is that CS gas is basically tear gas. And look, I don't know what's happening over there. I'm not trying to say that this is 100%, you know, like, let's just say exaggerated. But that's just a good example as to how they're going to try to continually push funding, continually push morale, try to get more and more support, while also bending that narrative to make the average person who doesn't have any thought process related to anything related to like a tactical scenario or environment or whatever, right? I understand CS gas because I read articles and stuff about law enforcement interactions, riots, all that kind of stuff, right? But the average person might not. So they can get that person to get on board with this idea that Russia's using chemical weapons, whereas people that are at least more versed in this type of situation, can look at that and say, yeah, it is a chemical, I guess, right? So I wanted to share that because that's the news that's coming out right now about these chemical weapon attacks, but it doesn't rise to the same level as, like sarin gas, which is what, Syria was accused of using back when, Obama said there was a red line that would be crossed, which was crossed, and nothing happened. Mike H., CS gas is used in basic training for gas mask training. Don't breathe it in. It sucks. They burnt it on a dustpan. Right. Okay, so CS will attack your eyes, says the Watchman. Right. So it's bad for you, don't get me wrong. But I don't know if it's, I just don't know if it's at that level of like what they're trying to portray it as. I just wanted to share that example because I thought that was interesting for them to kind of push that idea there, of course. But then when you get to the facts, it's not exactly how it sounds, right? So what else is happening when it comes to this attritional war? Well, Europe is being weakened, and in some cases, maybe there's some validity here, but this is what's happening, so that's why we're talking about it. Trump's Russia threat against NATO, what U.S. allies are spending on defense. The former president has repeatedly said that the U.S. is unfairly carrying the financial burden of the security alliance. Right? This is from February 12th. Former President Donald Trump has stirred strong reactions in Europe after saying Washington might not protect NATO allies from potential attack from Russia if he wins the November election unless some members of the alliance step up their military spending. Now, I'm not trying to comment on this particular strategy. I want you to listen to it for a second, and then we're going to talk about why this concerns me and why you should be considering this an issue, okay? Speaking at a campaign rally on Saturday in South Carolina, the Republican Party's presidential frontrunner said he told an unnamed leader of a big country that is part of NATO that he would encourage them, Russia, to do whatever the hell they want with nations that don't spend sufficiently on defense. NATO, which was formed during the Cold War, consists of 31 nations, all of them in Europe except for the U.S. and Canada. Under Article 5 of the treaty that created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, an attack on one member prompts a response from all. Okay, so first off, I'm sure that was a huge country, not just a big country. But the other thing I want to say is that your thought process on like whether or not this is legitimate isn't what the problem here is. To me, this kind of places like a deadline on what these nations may or may not do or interact in based on the fact that this person might take over come January. So if you have a presidential candidate, a frontrunner, who's leading in the polls, right, who at this point in time is more likely to be the next president than the other candidates that are currently running, right? This is just from an outlier perspective. From another country, you're looking at this from this perspective, right? And this person is saying, I'm not going to like sit here and fund everybody anymore. And if they're not willing to spend money on their defense, I might not protect them. And if Russia invades, then oh well, right? What's your way out of that? How do you avoid becoming defenseless, right? And so, like I said before, earlier in this conversation, this ticking time bomb of this election cycle is really concerning for me. Because now we have incentive for some of these countries in Europe, these NATO countries, to maybe get involved in a conflict before they might not be defended if one were to erupt thereafter, right? So like, I'm not trying to comment on this strategy. What I'm trying to say is that this pushes that timeline up even faster for countries to decide if they need to do something or not, right? So this might help stall any Russian aggression or any other adversarial aggression, right? To say, okay, well, if we wait, he might not protect them, right? So that might be even easier for us. But for our allies, especially NATO countries who don't spend enough on defense based on their GDP, right? And for our NATO allies who are expecting protection that know they need it no matter what, or else they're totally screwed, maybe it would behoove them to get that protection before it's no longer available. It's kind of like if someone were to, crash their car right before their insurance policy was up, right? Oh no, I can't believe it happened a week before my policy ran out. But yeah, I'm going to need a new car now, right? So, which is, I'm pretty sure, fraud, by the way. So don't do that. I'm not telling anyone to do that. But what I'm trying to say is that This concerns me that this might incentivize someone to force someone else's hand. It might incentivize a country who would otherwise be a victim of potential aggression in the future to ensure that they are protected, because that protection is there now, which means if they were to be attacked or forced to be attacked at this point in time, the protection would then still exist and then began. And then once this new regime takes over, well, it's already happening. So now it's too late, right? This is where my thought process goes. I try to look at this stuff with more than just your base interaction of like, well, I read that and it said this, right? You have to think outside the box a little bit. Our enemies are doing it all the time. So let me know your thoughts in the chat if you guys think any of that seems relevant, because that's just how my brain's been working lately. I'm not sold on the idea that anyone is past, these FF type scenarios or aren't willing to engage in open conflict in order to establish a level of protection or whatever it might be. Like, I don't have that faith in these governments to not do egregious things to do whatever benefits them the most, right? I mean, we see it happen to ours all the time. So why wouldn't anyone else's? So, remember, kids, the Geneva Convention outlaws flamethrowers, which are an important agricultural tool in the U.S. Thanks, P. Fletch 83. I can appreciate that. Viv B, my dog has gas demons. Well, I'm sorry. I think you should probably exercise those gas demons. Do the best you can. All right. Hey, Northern Girl Hobbies, glad you made it. Thanks for modding. Always appreciated. Big time. And it looks like the general consensus is that CS gas is awful. No one wants to interact with it if they don't have to. But still not to the level of, sarin or something like that. So it was just an example as to how you can reach the less informed with these sensational headlines. And even though everything is true, technically, the facts reveal maybe a different story, right? That's exactly where we are now. Okay, so we're talking about funding Ukraine, right? On a Super Bowl Sunday, the Senate's trying to push all these things through while they have the cover of darkness, right? Which a lot of people, you might take that however you want when it comes to that. But we're also trying to fund Israel. So what's going on over there? Why do we got to keep funding it? Well, that's not ending anytime soon. In fact, it's getting worse, and it's getting other countries involved, and peace accords that have been around for quite some time now might be canceled. What am I talking about? Well, and by the way, who knows? Maybe I'll be canceled. We'll see. It just happens sometimes. Anyway, let's move forward and talk about what's going on there right now, okay? This is from today. Israel frees 2 hostages. Gaza officials say 67 killed in assault. Okay. Doha, Jerusalem, February 12th. Reuters. Israel freed 2 Israeli Argentine hostages held by Hamas in Rafah on Monday in a ferocious rescue operation which killed 67 Palestinians in the southern Gaza City, where about 1 million civilians have sought refuge from months of bombardments. Now, in case you're not aware, Rafah is basically on the border of Egypt, but Rafah is kind of like a new territory that Israel is currently operating in, and this will matter here in a minute. So let's keep going. The mission by the Israeli military, the Shin Bet Security Service, and a special police unit freed Fernando Simon Marman, 60, and Luis Hare, 70, the military said. They were among 250 people seized during the October 7th raid by Hamas militants that triggered Israel's war on Gaza. More than 4 months on, much of the densely populated strip of the land on the Mediterranean is in ruins, with 28,340 Palestinians dead and 67,984 wounded, according to Gaza health officials, with many others believed to be buried under rubble. The Israeli military says 31 hostages have died in that time, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Monday's rescue showed that military pressure should continue, and he brushed aside international alarm at its plans for a ground assault on Rafah. Why is there international alarm? Trust me, we are getting there. U.S. President Joe Biden, who has become increasingly vocal that Israel should not carry out a ground offensive in Rafah without a plan to protect civilians, is scheduled on Monday to meet Jordan's King Abdullah, who has been on a diplomatic tour of Western capitals to push for a ceasefire. I'm sure that meeting is going to be very productive. A Reuters journalist at the scene in Rafah saw a vast area of rubble where buildings, including a mosque, had been destroyed. Israel says many of those killed are militants. The Gaza ministry says 70% are civilians, okay? So, why does that matter? Well, first off, that operation is continually expanding, which means everything else is still continuing to happen. Don't forget, we have groups like Hezbollah and the Houthis saying that as long as that operation is ongoing, so will their operation. So, be that what it is, things are going to continue in that area. But here's the thing. Egypt now is threatening to void its decades-old peace treaty with Israel. What does that mean, right? Well, this is from yesterday. Now, here's what's interesting. Egypt is threatening to void this peace treaty if Israel begins a large-scale offensive in Rafah. Now, that hostage rescue situation was in Rafah today. This was Egypt yesterday saying this. Israel's not going to stop just because Egypt is saying to, which means things can get really dicey there very quickly, all right? It was a warm handshake between the unlikeliest of statesmen, conducted under the beaming gaze of U.S. President Jimmy Carter. Sunlight streamed through the trees at Camp David, Maryland, as Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin solidified a landmark agreement that has allowed over 40 years of peace between Israel and Egypt. It has served as an important source of stability in a volatile region. That peace has held through 2 Palestinian uprisings and a series of wars between Israel and Hamas. But now, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowing to send Israeli troops into Rafah, a city in Gaza on the border with Egypt, the Egyptian government is threatening to void the agreement. Here's a look at the history of the treaty and what could happen and all that kind of stuff. So this goes all back to the 70s. But here's the thing. The talks culminated in the Camp David Accords in September 1978 and a peace treaty the following year. Under the peace treaty, Israel agreed to withdraw from the Sinai, which Egypt would leave demilitarized. Israeli ships were granted passage through the Suez Canal, a key trade route. The countries established full diplomatic relations in Israel's first peace agreement with an Arab country. Okay, this, to me, sounds like if this agreement was to be tossed aside, suddenly we don't have a demilitarized Sinai, and we also don't have access for Israel to the Suez Canal, which is going to be problematic for Western interest, right? So, okay, let's see here. All right, Egypt opposes any move that could send desperate Palestinians fleeing across the border onto its territory. Rafah also serves as the besieged territory's main entry point for humanitarian aid, and an Israeli attack could stifle the deliveries of key supplies. Rafah's population has swelled from 280,000 people to an estimated 1.4 million as Palestinians flee fighting elsewhere in Gaza. Hundreds of thousands of those evacuees are living in sprawling tent camps. Netanyahu has ordered the military to prepare a plan to evacuate all Palestinian civilians before the offensive starts, but it is unclear where they will go. Netanyahu said Sunday they would be able to return to open spaces farther north, but those areas have been badly damaged by the Israeli offensive. Okay, you see that they don't care. Israel doesn't care because they know Western interests are going to swoop in one way or the other, right? This is why this is a problem. This whole thing is escalating into a very unfixable scenario. The treaty greatly limits the number of troops on both sides of the border. This has allowed Israel to focus its military on other threats. Along with the war in Gaza, Israel has engaged in near daily skirmishes with Hezbollah militant group in Lebanon, while its security forces deploy heavily in the occupied West Bank. If Egypt were to nullify the agreement, it could mean that Israel can no longer rely on its southern border as an oasis of calm. Bolstering forces along its border with Egypt would no doubt challenge an Israeli military already thinly stretched. But it would bear serious ramifications for Egypt as well. Egypt has received billions of dollars in U.S. military assistance from the U.S. since the peace agreement. If the peace agreement is voided, it could jeopardize that funding. A massive military buildup would also strains Egypt's already struggling economy. Now listen, Egypt has a very large military. And Israel obviously has their Samson option, right? Which is their nuclear arsenal that's not public. Like, it doesn't necessarily exist, but we all know it's there, okay? What happens if they get cut off? What happens if all their borders are now surrounded by enemy troops because of these agreements falling apart? What happens if their military gets stretched too thin to continue the operations that they find to be so necessary to their survival? Maybe they do something, right? This is taking a while, which all attrition does. Okay. Do you guys think Biden will send in the UN for the southern border? Dan Rose? I don't know. I wish, back in the day I would have said no. Now I just don't know. Who really knows? The UN coming here, though, is like a kind of a big red flag for me, right? Gregor Zamina, LOL, blah, blah, blah. I'm trying my best here, man. Let's see here. And then I've got Tactic Squirrel. Have you tried out the AR Scabbard from Midway? Is it built well? If so, I don't know if I have actually. So, because I actually have a lot of their range bags and stuff, but I don't know if I have that exact one. So I will have to look that up a little bit later in this conversation to see if that's the truth. So if you can stick around, I'll try my best to remember to do that. And if I don't remember, make sure you tag me again and say, hey, don't forget. All right, let's talk about what else is happening in that region. A lot of you are probably aware, but there's been a lot of rumblings about how Iran is going to be able to have a nuclear bomb within a week. Okay, Iran capable of building a nuclear bomb in 1 week. Report finds as Middle East tensions flare. Now, here's one thing I want to just make you consider, okay? First off, this has a lot of like 2002 feelings to it in the sense of weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East, right? And second off, maybe they can build a nuclear bomb in a week, but like also can't they just get one, right? Like, and I'm not saying that facetiously. Like their allies are Russia, right? Who has access to nuclear weapons. And they also have plenty of access to the black market. They have the money to buy something if they wanted to off the black market. Lots of nuclear devices have gone missing since the Cold War. Some of them the size of a suitcase. So this whole thing, I mean, look, them being able to produce them, of course, is going to give them more access to using them. But I don't have many doubts that they can't just have one already. Right? Like they don't, like just because they can't build one doesn't mean they don't have one. So this feels more to me like a push for why we need to do more, right? For why we need to go in, for why we need to stop them, more so than it is an actual threat. That's my feeling on this, because it's very clear that our public officials would like to see us enter a war with Iran. And what better way than to use what worked before? Weapons of mass destruction. It was a thing, and everyone went with it, and it worked. An Iran watchdog group says the country has enough weapons-grade uranium to build a nuclear weapon in just 1 week. The Institute for Science and International Security published the findings in a report on Monday, saying Tehran could produce a total of 6 bombs in a month. Okay. Also, I just want everyone to be aware that the Institute for Science and International Security's acronym would be ISIS. I don't know if that's a coincidence, but I find it interesting. The volatile situation in the region is providing Iran with a unique opportunity and increased internal justification for building nuclear weapons, while the United States and Israel's resources to detect and deter Iran from succeeding are stretched thin. The report states, Iran's nuclear weapons capabilities are more dangerous than they have ever been, while its relations with the West are at a low point. Iran can break out and produce enough weapon-grade enriched uranium for a nuclear weapon in a week, using only a fraction of its 60% enriched uranium, the report continued. This breakout could be difficult for inspectors to detect promptly if Iran took steps to delay inspectors' access. Okay? I don't even know why they're allowing inspectors anymore, to be honest. I mean, this doesn't even make sense. It's a fake aid, I assume. But, this is from February 7th. Okay? So we got like 2 days left. Just so everyone's aware. By 2 days from now, Iran could have 6 bombs produced. Well, that's in a month. So let's just say at least one. Okay. Okay. So, what do you guys think about that? All right. It's one thing after the next. And this attritional SHTF we're all facing, it hurts us the same as it hurts our military, the same as it hurts all of our allies, the same as it hurts our adversaries, right? We're being worn down slowly until we are too exhausted and have no morale left to do anything else about it. And I would assume that's the strategy moving forward in just about every aspect of our lives when it comes to any level of military action or resistance or just maintaining a level of sovereignty, right? I mean, think about the southern border. Regardless of the Border Patrol's leadership, the boots on the ground tend to want to do their job and are not able to. At least that's my understanding. And their morale must be so low that they've just given up basically at this point. And so that's a great example here domestically that shows you what it looks like after you just can't keep up any longer. And of course, just so you're all aware, I mean, the whole Texas standoff down there is still going on. Alaska is deploying the National Guard there via the federal orders at this point, I believe. So there's a lot to kind of keep an eye on down there. But so far, it's maintained just a level of standoff, basically, right? So let's see here. Someone is talking about, I have a feeling of a time crunch finishing preps, said Patriot Zero. You know, here's what I want to say. And I'll try to give you some at least like personal advice regarding that. If you get your basics covered, then don't push yourself so hard to finish up whatever goals you have that you strain yourself, whether or not that be via energy or financially or from stress or whatever it might create for you. We have to still approach things as a marathon. If you don't have the basic necessities, then I would feel that crunch a lot harder, to be honest with you all. If I didn't have food or like some level of water storage or access, reliable access, right? And if I didn't have some kind of way to generate power, right? Like I would be feeling that crunch a lot harder. But if you're topping things off or trying to reach a goal that's like, all right, I got 3 months of food, I'd really like to get to 6. Don't push yourself so hard that you get there, but then it screws up other parts of your life in the interim, right? Like we have to still maintain a level head while moving forward in this preparedness game that we're all playing, right? So that's just something I wanted to mention, okay? Welder USA says water, water, water. I like water. I think it's a good idea. Okay, so here is something that I thought was also interesting regarding Middle East action right now. This is an opinion piece from The Hill, but it's from the 8th of February, right? So within the week. Biden should know by now why his message to Iran isn't getting through. A tiered approach is how National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby described the U.S. response to the January 28th attack against Tower 22 in Jordan. That attack, carried out by the Iran-backed Islamic resistance in Iraq, killed 3 American soldiers and wounded another 40. President Joe Biden's goal is to degrade the group's ability to attack American troops and facilities while sending a strong signal to their backers, namely Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So, first off, if this is our strategy against militants who are openly attacking American soldiers in conflict zones, then I would assume that's going to be our strategy just about anywhere for any purpose, right? They want to degrade. They're not trying to defeat them. They're just going to degrade them. Why? Because they believe they can outlast them. It might be naive based on historical precedent when it comes to these guerrilla groups and these militant groups, but that's the strategy. Attrition, once again, it takes a long time, but it hurts both sides in the process. Waiting out your enemy still makes you have to wait them out. Like you can't give them an opening during that time, right? So you're still spending resources, you're still spending energy, you're still spending, manpower and everything else required in order to maintain that standstill. Anyway, okay. Let's see here. Okay. I'm going to come over here and so the only message Iran seems to be getting loud and clear from the airstrikes conducted last Friday is that the White House is reluctant to strike targets inside Iran. Their proxies, yes, but not Iran directly. Therefore, Iran's response was to launch still more attacks through its proxies. Although Iran respects the capabilities of the U.S. military, it does not fear Biden, the man who would be responsible for giving the order to escalate. When Biden and his spokesperson say they do not want a war with Iran or they do not want to widen the war in the Middle East, Tehran believes them. And that is the only message Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei hears. Everything else is noise. For Iran, it's part of the cost of doing business to have the U.S. target its proxies in northern Iraq and southeastern Syria. They're simply tools in Iran's toolbox to be discarded when their usefulness is complete. What seemingly is not at risk are the instruments of war that Iran maintains within its own borders. IRGC facilities and leadership, the Shahed 136 UAV production facility in Esfahan, nuclear facilities weaponizing uranium, and oil production facilities funding their proxies. And even some senior leadership of these proxy groups does not make the target list. Okay? So, just be aware that the problem with this attritional concept is that it doesn't solve the problem. In a lot of ways, it can make it worse. Until eventually someone gives up. But what happens in between then and now? And don't forget, before that group gives up, at what level are they willing to act to try to do a last-ditch effort, right? The grand finale. And keep in mind, I mean, World War II is a great example of this, okay? Japan started utilizing kamikaze pilots because they had to win no matter what. And so they were willing to send pilots to their absolute death in order to accomplish their goals. And in response to this kamikaze strategy, we also did a last-ditch effort by dropping nuclear bombs on cities in Japan. So it's not a good thing to get to that point either, right? Okay. I've been using RV water filters, fairly cheap and plentiful, says Welder USA. I use one for refilling my water storage tote, and it works well because it's just I'm using well water. It's coming straight from the hose, so it's not going through any type of treatment system or anything like that. And what's nice is that the water going into the storage tank has that extra additional level of filtration. So and then of course I still treat the water in order to store it for a period of time using bleach. But I think the filter is an excellent step in between the two resources in order to make sure that there's that extra level of protection, I guess. So let's see here. This whole situation is still going, and it's going to cost us a lot here at home. I hope everyone's aware of this and ready for it. Yemen's Houthis target U.S.-linked ship with missiles. Okay, this just happened today. Houthi fighters have fired on a ship that they identified as a United States-owned while it traveled in waters off Yemen. The Iran-linked armed group said on Monday that Star Iris was targeted with a number of suitable naval missiles in an accurate and direct strikes. The Houthis have attacked numerous ships in the Red Sea in recent months, disrupting the key trade route between Europe and Asia, and called for an end to Israel's bombardment of Gaza. Yahya Saree, the Houthis' military spokesman, said that the strike on the vessel, owned by the U.S.-listed Greece-based firm Starbolt Carriers Corp., came in vindication of the oppressed Palestinian people and support and solidarity with our brothers in the Gaza Strip. The United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations confirmed that a vessel was attacked by 2 missiles at 035 GMT, some 40 nautical miles south of Al-Makka in Yemen. The crew are reported safe in the vessels proceeding to the next port of call, it said, advising transit through waters near Yemen with caution. Okay? So, they're still going. We have attacked them multiple times. I believe it was 85 targets have been hit since we decided to start actually launching airstrikes after our base in Jordan was attacked. It hasn't stopped their activity at all. Just like the previous article said, they don't respect us to that degree, and we basically told them we're not going to attack Iran directly, so they're going to keep going. Now, the problem here isn't that we're not stopping them from doing it. The problem is what it's going to do to the cost of goods here in the United States. Maersk CEO says military operations can't guarantee safety of ships in the Red Sea. We have our mission in the Red Sea right now, Prosperity Guardian, which is supposed to be protecting the cargo going through that area in order to maintain economic flow. And unfortunately, it's not working. As you can see, another ship was attacked and possibly hit. We're getting conflicting reports on that, honestly. But either way, these companies aren't going to just keep paying for it. The military operations in the Red Sea cannot guarantee the safety of commercial shipping in the region, the chief executive officer of a major shipping company said on Thursday. During a 2023 third quarter earnings call, Maersk CEO Vincent Clerc mentioned the lack of guaranteed safety in the Red Sea, which has come under several attacks by the Yemen-based Houthis. Clerc said disruptions in the Red Sea have affected about a third of the company's container volume, which was less than the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, think of that. This is huge. Okay? This is going to cost us at home in our wallets. We've not seen the level of threat peak. To the contrary, Clerc said, the amount or the range of weapons that are being used for these attacks is expanding, and there's no clear line of sight to when and how the international community will be able to mobilize itself and guarantee safe passage for us. As of February 8th, At least 3 Maersk ships have been targeted by Houthi missiles and drones, according to USNI News timeline of activity in the Red Sea since October 7th. The Houthis threatened the crew of MV Maersk Gibraltar, which sailed under a Hong Kong flag, with missiles if it did not stop sailing in the Red Sea on December 14, 2023. This prompted Maersk to pause shipping. Okay? It's just getting worse. On January 30th, Maersk suspended all bookings to Djibouti as a result of the tensions in the Middle East. In addition to its pause on Red Sea shipping, on January 26th, the company announced it would instead transit around the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. Okay? It's not improving. It's going to cost us more. All these goods coming through that area are going to cost us more. It's really, really bad, in all honesty. Okay? So, moving on. We got a lot to cover tonight. I'm trying to get through this, okay? All right. Wing It with Ethan says, slow at first, then quick. Robert Larson suggests getting out of debt. And we also have Law of the Minimum saying, to ya booty. All right. So, what about, so we have all these distractions. We have the Senate trying to do stuff on Super Bowl Sunday, which is sus, right? We have all this stuff in the Middle East. We have all this stuff in Ukraine. We have all this funding and everything else going on. Anyone else forget about that one big country that is most likely to do something egregious to the United States? Oh, yeah. I haven't, but some people might have. So let's talk about it. The logistics of war, how Washington is preparing for a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. This is from February 8th, okay? When U.S. and Australian troops practiced amphibious landings, ground combat, and air operations last summer, they drew headlines about the Allies deepening defense cooperation to counter China's growing military ambitions. But for U.S. war planners preparing for a potential conflict over Taiwan, the high-profile Talisman Sabre exercises had a far more discreet value. They helped create new stockpiles of military equipment that were left behind in Australia after the drills ended in August, U.S. officials told Reuters. The United States and its allies are increasingly worried that in the coming years, Chinese President Xi Jinping could order his military to seize Taiwan, the democratically governed island China considers its own territory. So the U.S. military is taking a hard look at its own military readiness and trying to play catch-up in a critical area: its logistics network. The equipment from Talisman Sabre included roughly 330 vehicles and trailers and 130 containers in warehouses in Bandiana in southeastern Australia, the Army says. The amount of equipment which the United States military has not previously acknowledged is enough to supply about 3 logistics companies with as many as 500 or more soldiers focused on ensuring supplies reach warfighters. It's kind of the material needed for a future drill, a natural disaster, or in a war. We're looking to do this more and more, Army General Charles Flynn, the top Army commander in the Pacific, told Reuters in an interview. There's a number of other countries in the region where we already have agreements to do that, he added, without naming specific countries. Reuters interviews with more than 24 current and former U.S. officials found that American military logistics in the Pacific is one of the greatest U.S. vulnerabilities in any potential conflict over Taiwan. Now, first off, what does this kind of tell you? Logistics are important, right? So logistics wins wars. Keep that in mind when you're prepping. The other thing to keep in mind is that we're not just stashing stuff there for no reason, okay? We're putting it there because we believe we're going to need it. And China is aware of it. So what that also means is that they know the longer they give us to stockpile said munitions all over the Pacific, the more prepared we'll be to defend Taiwan or to combat them if something were to happen. So, to me, this shows planning for a war that's expected. And I think there's good reason to believe it's expected. Not to mention what they'll probably do here stateside if it happens. And this is real, and this is something you should really think about, because there's no reason to believe they won't do this. They have the capability. They're ready. They're literally just waiting on someone to say go. Chinese hackers spent 5 years waiting in U.S. infrastructure, ready to attack, agencies say. The report is one of the first public indications that Chinese hackers have had years of access to U.S. infrastructure. Now, here's something very interesting. After I talk about this for a second, I'm going to tell you that Beijing literally has warned us that they'll do this, okay? Chinese hackers have at times secretly hidden in U.S. infrastructure for up to 5 years, ready to conduct a potentially destructive cyber attack if the two countries were to go to war, federal agencies said Wednesday. The claim was published in a public cybersecurity warning, one of the largest and starkest of its kind, from 6 U.S. agencies, as well as allied cybersecurity and intelligence agencies from Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the UK. Over the past year, U.S. officials have repeatedly issued warnings that hackers working for China's intelligence services keep gaining stealthy access to U.S. infrastructure. They feared such access could turn into a destructive cyber attack in the event of a major conflict, like China invading Taiwan, as the U.S. has said it would come to Taiwan's aid. The report doesn't name any specific victims, but said the PRC state-sponsored hackers have targeted key infrastructure, primarily in communications, energy, transportation systems, and wastewater systems sectors in the continental and non-continental United States and its territories. One characteristic of the campaign is how stealthy the hackers' tactics are, making it difficult for owners of infrastructure companies to know they've been hacked. The report is the first public indication that China's hackers have been working at the project for so long, or that they've gained access for so many years without being noticed. While the U.S. generally does not condemn other nations for using their intelligence services to conduct cyber espionage, and does not deny engaging in that practice, the report says that this campaign appears to be hackers positioning themselves purely to have the potential capability to wreak havoc across the country. The hackers' choice of targets and pattern of behavior is not consistent with traditional cyber espionage or intelligence gathering operations, the report says. The U.S. authoring agencies are concerned about the potential for these actors to use their network access for disruptive effect in the event of potential geopolitical tensions and/or military conflicts. Is this a problem? I think it's a problem. Why is it a problem? Because of this. February 7th, the day before the last article. Beijing warns of heavy price for obstructing China's reunification with Taiwan as U.S.-Japan stage military drills. What would that heavy price possibly be? Beijing's embassy in Tokyo warned that anyone obstructing China's reunification would pay a heavy price as the U.S. and Japan hold biennial joint drills reportedly featuring a mock conflict over Taiwan. Citing anonymous government sources, Japanese media reported that Washington and Tokyo had named Beijing as a hypothetical enemy for the first time during this year's Keen Edge exercise. According to the reports, this year's drill centers around a Taiwan contingency. If anyone insists on meddling in China's internal affairs and obstructing China's reunification, then it will not just be about the issue of a so-called hypothetical enemy. They'll have to pay a heavy price, the embassy said in a written statement on Tuesday. Do you have questions about the biggest topics and trends? I'm sorry, I know it's an ad. But reports also said the drills used real unaltered maps for the exercise, breaking a norm of using maps that differ slightly from real ones. Beijing said it expressed grave concerns to Tokyo following the media reports, while Japan denied the accuracy of the drill details described in the reports, according to the Chinese embassy statement. Beijing sees Taiwan as a part of its territory to be reunited by force if necessary. No one should underestimate the solid determination, firm will, and strong capacity of the Chinese people to defend their national sovereignty and territorial integrity, the embassy said, noting that some forces in Japan had exaggerated the situation in a Taiwan Strait and provoked confrontation. Okay, they're saying it. They're telling you. They're going to do something bad if we get involved, and we're saying we're going to get involved, okay? Let's see here. Viv B says, so gross mosquito burgers. I have a feeling you're probably right. Do 2 hours, says Patriot Zero. I cannot. Why? Because I have my members only live stream here in about 15 minutes. So if you want to be part of that, it's for YouTube channel members and for Subscribestar members. So if you want to join the Subscribestar, I'll put a link in the live chat right now. There's also one in the description as well as a pinned comment. Thank you for the support regarding that. And the live stream, the reason it's private for members only or Subscribestar members is because, let's be honest, I'm trying to do something for the people who want to support me directly, and it's just something I came up with as a way for us to hang out. So it's not to exclude anybody, and don't worry, no pertinent information is shared in those chats. It's a casual format where we just hang out. So anyway, and you can also hit the join button below and be part of the membership if you'd rather, in order to be in the members only chat. All right, Let's keep going. This is a concern, and this is real. And I don't know if Russia's always the boogeyman. It could be internal, and then using Russia as a boogeyman. But you should be aware of this, okay? Just please keep this in mind. The worst thing that can happen in this country is civil war. It might be necessary at some point. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that, to be honest. But regardless, even if it's necessary, it's still the worst thing that can happen. It'll be a Christmas gift to all of our adversaries. Everyone who hates us will be the biggest beneficiaries, okay? But this is what's being put out, and you should be aware of it. Russia is boosting calls for civil war over Texas border crisis. So says Wired, February 7th. Now listen, even if this isn't accurate, the fact that it's being put out there is enough for you to pay attention to it. That's just my opinion, okay? A Russian disinformation campaign is deploying everything from high-ranking lawmakers and government officials to lifestyle influencers, bloggers, and powerful state-run media outlets to stoke divisions in the United States around the Texas border crisis. I've been saying it, and I've been saying it for a very long time. Dividing us is the name of the game. At any opportunity that they can do that at, they're going to take that opportunity, okay? Wired had also obtained exclusive access to data from two separate disinformation research groups that demonstrate a coordinated Russian effort on Telegram and X to sow discord by pushing the narrative that the U.S. is heading for civil war. Although Hollywood's just making a movie about it. So are they Russian now too? I don't know. But anyway, the disinformation campaign began in earnest in late January and expanded after Russian politicians spoke out when the U.S. Supreme Court lifted an order by a lower court and sided with President Joe Biden's administration to rule that U.S. Border Patrol officers were allowed to take down razor wire fencing erected by the Texas National Guard. Days later, when Texas Governor Greg Abbott refused to stand down, former Russian President and Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev, who is currently deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, claimed that the Texas border dispute is another vivid example of the U.S. hegemony getting weaker. Establishing a People's Republic of Texas is getting more and more real, Medvedev added on X, claiming the situation could lead to a bloody civil war which cost thousands upon thousands of lives. Others chimed in. It's high time the American president, following in his predecessor Obama's footsteps, declares Texas must go and assembles an international coalition to liberate its residents in the name of democracy. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova wrote on Telegram. Russian lawmaker Sergei Mironov even offered Texas help. If necessary, we are ready to help with the independence referendum. And of course, we will recognize the People's Republic of Texas if there is one, Mironov wrote on X. After these comments, state media, influencers, and bloggers quickly got involved. Over the past 2 weeks, state-run media outlets like Sputnik and RT have called the dispute between the Texas governor and the Biden administration a constitutional crisis and an unmitigated disaster. While one Sputnik correspondent posted a video on the outlet's X account stating, "There's a big convoy of truck drivers going down there, so it can very easily get out of hand. It can genuinely lead to an actual civil war where the U.S. Army is fighting against U.S. citizens." On Telegram, there were clear signs of a coordinated effort to boost conversations around the Texas crisis, according to analysis shared exclusively with Wired by Logically, a company using AI to track disinformation campaigns. The idea of targeting highly contentious U.S. domestic issues and amplifying them via their own channels. It's the standard of the Russian playbook for disinformation. Kyle Walter, director of research at Logically, tells Wired. Okay, now listen. Of course, these issues could lead us down a very dangerous path. But, okay, and why am I saying but? Because there's reason to believe that this could be used for a lot of different things, especially if it was developed, I don't know, internally. And the reason I say that is because there's so much internal, let's just call them programs, that don't have our best interests in mind, that would make me believe there would be this possibility, okay? Like for example, one of the most basic ones, Operation Mockingbird, right? Like we all know, right? So if things like that exist, why wouldn't I at least have some lingering question in my mind as to whether or not that's actually Russia or maybe coordinated with Russia or possibly just generated domestically? I don't know. But I can tell you that it really does create an excellent reason for why we need AI to censor more disinformation on the internet, right? And this should concern everybody. This is 1984 to a T. We're just going right down that path, and I don't know what else to say. National Science Foundation spent millions on AI censorship tools to quash misinformation. Oh, interesting. It's from February 6th, okay? Now listen, what the story I just shared with you will be used, or things of that nature will be used to justify the necessity of these programs, which are very bad for, I don't know, the First Amendment. So be aware of this, but this is happening. The National Science Foundation spent millions of taxpayer dollars developing censorship tools powered by AI that big tech could use to counter misinformation online and advance state-of-the-art misinformation research. You like all that Russian misinformation we just discussed, right? That could stoke a civil war, so it's very dangerous and we need to do something about it. House investigators on the Judiciary Committee and Select Committee on the Weaponization of Government said the NSF awarded nearly $40 million, including $13 million to 3 universities and a software company to develop AI tools that could censor information far faster and at a much greater scale than human beings. The University of Michigan, for instance, was awarded $750,000 from NSF to develop its WiseDex, artificial intelligence tool to help big tech outsource the responsibility of censorship on social media. University researchers promoted the tool as a way to get people off our backs for how we act on misinfo and do things we know work without backlash. I mean, what else do I need to say about this? They are creating it, they're working on it, they want it to exist, and they're going to justify its existence because of things that we just discussed regarding Russian disinformation campaigns being used to try to stoke civil war within the country, right? I don't know what else to say. What I do want to say, though, is that this whole AI thing is becoming increasingly dangerous regarding censorship and just online presence in general. And I will tell you all that this channel has a strange relationship when it comes to monetization, right? And I've had multiple videos recently be, let's just say restricted regarding monetization. And I challenged all those restrictions because in general, I follow all the guidelines and everything when I monetize a video. Because if I'm not following those guidelines, I just don't monetize it, right? Because it's just not worth the strife. So I've actually appealed those situations that have occurred recently, and I've won every single one of them, which is odd because I honestly thought I wasn't going to win them. Because what happens is a human reviewer comes in and says, "Oh yeah, that does look fine," or they say, "No, it's bad, right?" And every single video I've had this happen to, of course, was firearms related. So, gray area, right? But I won every appeal, which just goes to show AI is coming in. It's shutting down anything it doesn't like, and then it's putting the burden on you to get human involvement to say whether or not it's okay. And luckily, the person who's been reviewing my channel, at least, or the people, I don't know how that works to be honest, but they all seem to agree with me that everything should be fine based on me following guidelines. So it just kind of tells you where things are heading. They're going to put the burden on the person rather than the AI. The AI is just going to make a decision. It doesn't matter, right? It's what it does. And then we're going to have to argue for ourselves. And what that is and what it feels like in many ways, and I know this doesn't apply to people who aren't on YouTube and all this stuff, right? But hey, what's up, MB? Good to see you. What it sounds like to me is, guilty until proven innocent. And that's kind of where we're heading. And that's what it will look like in all aspects of having an online presence, whether or not you are a content creator or whether or not you are just a participant in chats or comment sections or forums or whatever it is you do online. We'll get to a point here in the near future where you will be guilty until proven innocent rather than the way things are supposed to work here in this country, right? And that's what I'm experiencing currently right now on this platform when it comes to monetization. They cut it off, right? I have to prove to them that it's correct. But guess what? Generally, those videos are going to post before that appeal goes through because I try to stay on a schedule, to be honest with you, because it's just a way to make sure I don't fall off, I guess, right? But in reality, what happens is, guess what? I post, it's restricted. The majority of the views come in the first few days because that's just how this platform works. And then they go, "Oh, by the way, you were right. It's actually good to go." And there you have it, right? and just apply that to anything else online and think about how that could affect you. So my first two opening hails were scrubbed from the chat, by the way, Magic Paper. Well, I'm sorry for that, Savagely, but you know what? I still like you. So I've been winning reviews. Yes, Green Gregs. It's very odd. Trust me. I must have a really nice moderator here on this channel. I got to go. We got a members-only chat coming right now. So thank you all so much. Really appreciate all the support. Like I said, if you want to support me directly, Subscribestar is a link in the description as well as in the pinned comment. Or you can go ahead and just join the channel membership right with the join button below. But honestly, even if you don't do that, the thumbs up, hitting subscribe, or even just being here is awesome, and I really appreciate it. You all do the best you can to keep preparing. Anything else you need from me at all, magicprepper.com is a good place to go. And besides that, it's going to be it for Magic Prepper.